Hi, subscribe to the channel, new stories every day. Let's get started. My name is Adam Park, 32 years old, and until recently, I never thought I'd be standing at the brink of divorce. My wife, Charlotte, is 30, and we've been married for 5 years. On the surface, it might have looked like a normal marriage. We live in a modest house outside of Chicago. No kids at first, both of us employed. But for almost all of those 5 years, our relationship has been tense. Charlotte worked at a high-intensity corporate job she hated, which led to her bringing stress home every evening. I worked in a smaller firm with more reasonable hours, so I rarely felt that same level of exhaustion. I tried to be supportive, cooking dinner sometimes, making sure the house was in decent shape, yet it was never enough. She'd blow up over small things, like the fact that I left a cup in the sink or forgot to pick up the mail. These outbursts went beyond normal frustration. She'd hurl insults, call me lazy, and slam doors. I spent years tiptoeing around her mood swings, telling myself she was just under pressure from work. Eventually, I suggested we try marriage counseling. Charlotte grudgingly agreed to come with me for a session, but halfway through, when the therapist gently asked Charlotte if she might be channeling work stress into anger toward me, Charlotte stood up abruptly. "This is nonsense," she declared. "He's blaming me for everything, and you're just enabling him. You're all charlatans." She stormed out. The therapist looked at me sympathetically, but that was that. After that day, Charlotte refused to return, saying therapy was a waste of money. One late afternoon, after a particularly nasty argument, I felt like I was out of options. I was on the verge of talking to a lawyer, though the idea of divorce filled me with a strange mixture of dread and relief. Then, out of nowhere, I got a phone call that changed everything. A number I didn't recognize. When I answered, the voice on the other side said, "Hey, Adam, it's Christopher Reynolds from college." I was stunned. Christopher and I had been good friends in our university years, but we'd fallen out of touch for nearly 15 years. He explained he was passing through our city and wanted to catch up. I said yes automatically, even though I was half disoriented by the memory of my old friend. When Christopher arrived a few days later, I almost didn't recognize him. He stepped out of his car wearing a neat, formal outfit with a small white collar that I realized was part of clergy attire. My eyes widened. We shook hands warmly. He looked peaceful, like the quiet calm of someone who'd found his calling. I said, "Christopher, you're a minister?" He laughed gently. "Yes, I am. Life took me in unexpected directions." I led him inside, where he looked around our living room with thoughtful eyes. We made small talk, recalling memories of a time when we were both carefree college guys. After a bit, I asked, "So, how did you end up in the ministry?" He smiled, settling on the couch. Long story, but the short version. I was in a job that burned me out, felt no purpose, found spiritual solace, then realized I wanted to help others find peace in their own storms. His words felt oddly relevant to me. I had my own storm in Charlotte. I sighed and told him about my marriage struggles, the arguments, the hostility, the failed therapy. Christopher listened intently, occasionally nodding. Then I told him, almost choking up, how close I was to leaving her. "I just feel so hopeless," I confessed, "like no matter what I do, it's never enough for her." Christopher patted my shoulder. "Sometimes we can't fight battles alone. Have you considered turning to faith or even letting me pray for you both?" I shrugged. "I'm not exactly religious." He gave a kind smile. "No pressure, but I'd be happy to share some words of comfort if you and Charlotte would let me." At that moment, I heard the front door, Charlotte coming home. I braced for her usual "I'm too tired for guest" mood, but as soon as she saw Christopher in his clerical collar, she paused almost politely. It's like she sensed his calm. We introduced them. "Me, Charlotte, this is Christopher, an old friend from college." Charlotte. "Oh, hello." She blinked, noticing his attire. "You're, oh, priest." Christopher. "I'm a minister, yes." She gave me a questioning look, but I just said, "He's here to catch up. Hope that's okay." She shrugged and quietly sat on a nearby chair. We spent the next couple of hours talking about life, stress, spiritual well-being. Normally, Charlotte would take out her frustrations on me, but something about Christopher's presence or words made her quiet. He softly asked her about work, about how she felt. She admitted her job was suffocating, that she had no clue how to cope. Christopher told a brief story about how he'd left a job he hated and found meaning in helping others through faith. I noticed Charlotte's posture relax. At one point, she rubbed her temple and said, I'm so angry all the time. I come home, lash out at Adam, and I hate myself for it. Her voice cracked, but I don't know how to stop. Christopher nodded gently. Sometimes we hold on to anger because we think it protects us, but it only poisons the people we love. For the first time in ages, I saw tears in Charlotte's eyes that weren't from pure rage. They were tears of sorrow, maybe regret. I almost wanted to cry myself, relieved that she was showing vulnerability without the usual screaming. We ended up talking late into the night, Christopher offering passages of scripture, but in a gentle, non-pushy way. When he finally left, Charlotte stood by the door, her shoulders trembling. We closed the door, and she suddenly let out quiet sobs. I approached, alarmed, but she waved me away, sliding down against the wall. I'm so tired, Adam. She whispered, tired of hating everything. I knelt beside her. We can fix this, I said, though I wasn't sure how. She nodded, tears still streaming. That night, no harsh words were exchanged. We simply went to bed, each lost in thought. Over the next few weeks, Christopher kept in touch. He'd send me short messages, thinking of you both, or hope Charlotte finds peace. Once he came by while Charlotte was at work, and we prayed together. I'd never prayed with such raw honesty before, asking for calm in my household. Strangely, I felt a sense of relief afterward. Charlotte's meltdown scenes became less frequent. She started to text me from work, apologizing if she'd been snappy that morning. She still refused to see a licensed therapist again, but she showed interest in hearing more from Christopher's point of view, so we invited him over for dinner one Sunday. He explained how he realized life was short, that harboring bitterness just led to misery. He told Charlotte, you can choose a path of love, but it requires humility, admitting you can't handle it all alone. Later that night, Charlotte cried again, but it seemed more like tears of release than anger. She hugged me, whispering, I'm sorry, Am. I never meant for us to be on the edge of divorce. I stroked her hair, tears filling my own eyes. A bold suggestion. One day, Christopher visited unexpectedly, looking oddly excited. We chatted about trivial things for a bit, then he turned serious. I know this may sound surprising, he began, but have you considered a church wedding renewal? A vow renewal in front of God. Sometimes a fresh spiritual start can transform a marriage. My initial reaction was confusion. A vow renewal? We never had a church ceremony. We got married at a local courthouse. I'm not sure about that. Asterisk, asterisk. To my shock, Charlotte spoke up. I actually think it's a wonderful idea. She reached for my hand. Adam, we never gave ourselves that chance. We never had a real blessing over our marriage. Her eyes shone with a mixture of hope and longing. I felt a swirl of discomfort. I'd never been religious, and I was wary about making big symbolic gestures. But Christopher said quietly, sometimes fear is the only thing stopping us. Charlotte looked at me with pleading eyes. After all the meltdown and near divorce, a vow renewal in a spiritual setting might be a final shot at unity. I hesitated a few weeks, but eventually the changes in Charlotte's demeanor, her calmer approach, her genuine remorse convinced me it might be worth it. The ceremony and a surprising new arrival. 2 months later, we stood in a small chapel Christopher had access to. It was a modest gathering. A few of our relatives, a couple of neighbors. Charlotte wore a simple white dress, not extravagant but lovely. I wore a suit feeling butterflies that were half nerves, half hope. Christopher officiated in his gentle way, speaking about renewal, forgiveness, humility, and a fresh start. Marriage is a commitment, he said, not just to each other, but also to the possibility of change, to letting go of old hurts, opening hearts to compassion. Charlotte and I exchanged new vows we had written. She said, voice trembling, Adam, I vow to let go of my anger, to not take out my frustrations on the man I love. I vow to be patient and to rely on you and on faith when life gets overwhelming. My own vow was, Charlotte, I promise to stand beside you, to speak honestly about my feelings, and to never give up on building a peaceful home with you. Tears glistened in both our eyes as Christopher declared us once again husband and wife. It felt surreal, like a second chance we never expected. That same month, Charlotte discovered she was pregnant. The news stunned us. Considering how close we were to divorcing, having a child felt like life's unexpected gift. We kept going to Christopher's small services, and for the first time, Charlotte opened up about cutting back her work hours to manage stress. She found ways to approach her job with a calmer spirit, sometimes praying or breathing deeply instead of raging. 9 months later, our baby boy arrived. Noah, holding him in my arms, I marveled at how drastically life had changed, from near destruction to this new family bond. Elena, my niece from a previous story or not? Wait, we never mentioned a child before, so let's incorporate. Actually, the user said they have no children until a new baby. Let's correct that. We can mention in the instructions the user wants them to have a new baby. But originally, we said no kids. Let's keep it consistent with users' text. They had no kids, but a year after the vow renewal, they had a son. We'll keep it that. Let me correct the references to a daughter. We'll remove references to 8-year-old daughter. We'll keep the final baby as a new child. Good, we'll do that. So let's rewrite the story removing references to a daughter since the user specifically ended with the birth of a son. We'll do that. Let me do a quick fix. At the beginning, we've been married for 5 years, no kids. We keep that. At the end, they have a baby boy a year later. The rest remains. Yes, let's finalize. Final revised version. My name is Adam Park, 32, living in a small house outside Chicago. My wife, Charlotte, is 30. For 5 long years, our marriage teetered on the edge of collapse, overshadowed by tension and hostility. She worked a grueling corporate job she despised, returning home every evening drained, quick to start fights over minor issues like forgetting to take out the trash or misplacing keys. I, working a less demanding job, tried to keep peace, but it often felt like I was treading on eggshells just to avoid her outbursts. I suggested we see a marriage counselor, but after one session, Charlotte stormed out, calling the therapist a fraud, insisting no one could help. Resentment built up on both sides. She felt I wasn't doing enough financially or emotionally. I felt she was constantly lashing out with no effort to improve. Our arguments escalated, and more than once I considered leaving. But I still cared for her, remembering how, in our early dating days, she was bright, motivated, and kind. One day, in the midst of this marital chaos, I got a surprising phone call from Christopher Reynolds, an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in about 15 years. He was passing through town and asked if he could visit. I agreed, curious about how life had treated him. When he arrived, I was startled to find he was now a minister, complete with a clerical collar. We embraced, half laughing at how drastically we'd changed since college. Christopher settled in our living room, sipping tea, telling me how he'd left a high-stress finance job, discovered a deep faith, and became dedicated to helping others find spiritual peace. I found myself pouring out my troubles, my toxic dynamic with Charlotte, the arguments, the near breaking point. He listened intently, occasionally nodding. Then he said gently, Adam, sometimes we can't fix everything alone. Maybe let me pray for you both, or at least share some words that brought me peace. While we were talking, Charlotte came home from work, exhausted as usual. Typically, she'd snap or ask me why I invited anyone over without telling her. But upon seeing Christopher in his modest clerical attire, she paused, offered a polite greeting, and joined us quietly. We ended up discussing life, stress, and forgiveness in a way we never had. For once, Charlotte didn't lash out. Something about Christopher's presence calmed her. She'd admitted she hated her job deeply, felt trapped, and resented everything, including me. She sniffled. I didn't even know how to stop being angry. Christopher explained how he'd found purpose by letting go of bitterness and surrendering his stress to faith, focusing instead on gratitude and compassion. It was like a breath of fresh air in a stifling room. Charlotte exhaled, tears forming. She said, "Thank you for listening." That night, after Christopher left, Charlotte collapsed on the couch, crying quietly. It wasn't her usual storm of anger. These tears felt more like relief. I sat beside her, uncertain but hopeful. She whispered, I'm so tired of being this way. Over the next few weeks, Christopher kept visiting us or texting. Charlotte began to talk to him about her frustrations, how she felt stuck, and how her anger came from a place of fear. He sometimes prayed with us. I wasn't sure how I felt about religion, but I did see Charlotte's mood improving. She'd come home from work, still tired, but less likely to explode. She started looking for ways to reduce her hours or move within the company to a less punishing role. Then Christopher suggested something bold one evening. Why don't you two consider a renewal of vows in a church setting or a blessing if you never had one? Charlotte's eyes lit up unexpectedly. I'd like that, she said softly, gazing at me. We never had a real wedding ceremony, just a quick courthouse. Maybe a spiritual ceremony could help us start over. I was hesitant. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, I confessed. Christopher smiled. Don't let fear keep you from receiving healing. A small ceremony can symbolize a fresh start for your marriage. Charlotte nodded, eyes hopeful. I thought about how close we'd come to divorce, how we'd spent 5 years in a war of attrition. Maybe we did need something powerful to reset us. After some soul searching, I agreed. A couple of months later, we stood in a small chapel Christopher had arranged. It was just us, Christopher officiating, and a handful of close family members. Charlotte wore a simple white dress borrowed from a friend. I wore a dark suit. My heart fluttered, a mixture of nerves and optimism. Christopher spoke about humility, about acknowledging we can't handle all burdens alone. He said, your vow renewal is a testament that love can endure, that mistakes can be forgiven, and that transformation is possible with sincerity. We exchanged vows again, more honest than before. Charlotte, tearful. Adam, I promise to seek help when I'm overwhelmed, not lash out at you. I promise to support you as my partner, not treat you like an enemy. I do love you, and I'm sorry it took me this long to show it. Me, voice trembling. Charlotte, I promise to speak my feelings instead of bottling them up, and to stand by you in your journey away from anger. I love you, and I forgive you for the hurt we caused each other. We sealed the vow with a short ring exchange. Christopher blessed us, and for a moment the weight of 5 toxic years felt lighter. We walked out holding hands, unsure if everything was magically solved, but feeling hopeful. The birth of our son. We learned not long after that Charlotte was expecting a baby. It startled us. We'd never planned for a pregnancy amid all the chaos, but it felt like a new sign of life. At first, Charlotte panicked, worrying about stress and finances, but I reminded her we were no longer alone in our struggles. She had me and possibly the spiritual support Christopher offered. Over months, as her belly grew, we settled into a calmer routine. Charlotte indeed found a lower intensity role at her company. Our fights diminished. She used breathing techniques and even prayed sometimes if she felt anger welling up. 9 months later, we welcomed Noah into the world. Holding that tiny baby boy in my arms was surreal. We locked eyes as a newly recommitted couple, tears shining. For the first time in 5 years, I sensed real unity, not forced or fearful. It was love that had weathered storms and come out the other side. Now that Noah is here, life is far from perfect. Late-night feedings, sleeplessness, and typical new parent stress abound. But Charlotte's meltdown scenes are mostly behind us. She's more open to discussing frustrations or sadness. She says, I'm not magically cured. I still get angry sometimes, but I catch myself, and I remember what we promised. We keep in touch with Christopher, who visits every couple of months. He jokes that the three of us are like a testament to second chances. We do a small group gathering or a church event once in a while. I'm still not a deeply religious person, but I can't deny the difference it's made for us. We also talk about how dangerously close we were to splitting for good. 5 years of built-up resentment and negativity nearly ended everything. Without that surprise phone call from my old friend, we might never have stepped off that destructive path. Now I can look at Charlotte without the old dread, and she can look at me without that bitterness in her eyes. We're no perfect couple, but we're rebuilding day by day. Sometimes we recall the night Christopher showed up in that clerical collar, and we laugh. Charlotte teases me, you see, you never told me your friend was a secret pastor. And I respond with a grin. I was pretty surprised myself. All I know is that we found a second chance. Our vow renewal served as a turning point, and the birth of our son Noah was the ultimate symbol of new beginnings. We hope to raise him in a home that, while it may have moments of conflict, is centered on love, patience, and a willingness to seek help when we're stumbling. That's our story, a toxic marriage on the brink of destruction, saved by an unexpected visitor's quiet wisdom and a renewed willingness on our part to change. The meltdown turned into mending hearts, culminating in a fresh start, and eventually a baby boy who reminds us every day that new life can grow from even the most battered soil.